NATO is getting very concerned about the number of incursions into its airspace as a result of the Ukrainian war. Some of those incursions, it has to be said, are from Ukrainian drones, which are off course. That tends to happen. That doesn't bother NATO too much, although it's quite annoying. But most of the incursions, of course, are from Russian systems. And that includes mainly drones, but also ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, aircraft, and even helicopters. Last year, there were over 70 significant incursions, and a lot of them concentrated around airports and military bases. And the view, of course, is that the Russians are conducting surveillance operations by looking as if drones have gone off course, but actually they've gone off course towards military bases. And NATO says that that level of activity has gone up by about 30% this year. So there are a number of hotspots in all of this. One hotspot is Romania. Quite a lot of incursions have taken place in Romania, about 33 in the last 12 months. Partly because the Russians are going for the Danube ports that the Ukrainians use, and when they go off track, they sometimes end up in Romania. That certainly happens. A second hotspot are the forests of eastern Poland, very heavily forested area here. And very often something goes off the radar, nobody knows where it is, and days or even weeks later, debris is found in the forests of missiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. And a third hotspot, of course, is the Baltic states, particularly Estonia and Latvia. And indeed, last year, 3 MiG-31s came through the Gulf of Finland into Estonian airspace and stayed there for quite a long time. The biggest intrusion was September last year, the 9th of September last year, when 20 drones came into Poland. And some of them were shot down, some of them went off course, some of them were not intercepted, and they just ran out of fuel. That was a big problem for NATO. It's pretty embarrassing because NATO didn't deal with it terribly well. So this is a phenomenon, it's increasing, and it will likely continue to increase as time goes on. Of course, some of them can be brought down. I mean, that is a Romanian explosion of a Jaran drone, which was a Russian drone, which the Romanians managed to get hold of and intercept. But that doesn't happen all that often. Why is Putin doing it? Well, I think there's 3 main reasons. One, to expose the defense. If you can actually trigger somebody's defenses, they switch everything on, you have a good look at it. And there is a good reason, a good defense reason, to try to create surveillance against those defenses. So one way of pressuring defenses is to keep on testing them, see what they've got. But a second reason is more political, to normalize the pressure, to make this into something that happens so often that NATO starts to relax. So that if the Russians try some sort of big operation, we won't notice for the first couple of days because we'll think it's all part of the normal pattern. And then the third reason is sheer intimidation. What the Russians want to do is to indicate to their European partners that if you keep on supporting Ukraine, there will be consequences. You are getting nearer and nearer to taking us, the Russians, on unless you stop supporting Ukraine. So some of that is complete intimidation. What can NATO do about it? Well, NATO can do a number of things. One is that it can increase or make more muscular the rules of engagement, particularly against aircraft that come into its airspace. And NATO says it's done this. It hasn't said how it's increased those rules of engagement, nor should it tell us. But it is said that we will be more muscular if we end up having confrontations again over the Gulf of Finland, over the Baltic states and so on, over Poland. We will be more assertive in future, which runs the risk of some sort of incident, air-to-air incident. We may do that. The second thing that NATO is talking about, and the EU as well, is to create a drone wall, a wall of defense from Finland right through to Romania. And a drone wall will consist of a number of things, lots of radars, lots of electronic jamming equipment, but also interceptors. And the sort of interceptors that it might involve are these sorts of things. This is a Ukrainian interceptor. It's called the Sting. It is literally just a drone. You can see there it is. Look, it's just a fast drone, but it's very quick. It's very agile. It's very small. That's duct tape. That tells you something about the way they're constructed and the size of them. Pieces of duct tape on it. But it works, it's cheap, and you can have thousands of them. That's just one example of interceptors. Now, the question is, could NATO build itself a drone wall all the way down there? No, it couldn't, because this distance here, Finland to Romania, is about 1,000 miles. And if you look at the Finland-Russia border, that's another 800 miles. There is no chance of an effective drone wall all the way along NATO's borders. But what we might end up with is bits of a drone wall, say in the north, around Poland, around the Baltic states, and perhaps towards the Black Sea port. That's plausible. And if it happens, it's going to happen quite quickly because the drone threat and the threat of intrusion into NATO airspace is growing all the time. Which is where we come back to a fundamental problem. Any defensive system, however good it is, can always be overwhelmed by sheer numbers, just sheer weight of attack. And in the era of drone production, when drones can be cheap and quickly produced, any defensive system can be, in principle, overwhelmed. The only way to deal with that is to back up your defense with deterrence. And deterrence is where you say to the adversary, don't even try it or else. The problem for European NATO is that it really isn't clear just what the or else might be.